I just love it, boy, when we get P.A.I.D. continually. That's right. All praises be to the ancestors and the creator as we just monetize the heck out of Wall Street on a day when all three major U.S. indexes are deep in the negative territory. S&P 500 down more than 1%, NASDAQ down more than 1%, and now the Dow is now down more than 200 points. My life is indeed good. As you know how to get P.A.I.D. bull bear, you don't care. As long as that market is open and there's trading activity going on, we will show you how to get P.A.I.D. right here inside the Classroom Not Walls radio broadcast and right within the Ask the Wiz Wealth Institute. Now, family members, so many of you have asked over the years, how can we trade in the Canadian market? And as you know, their market, for whatever reason, seems to be surprisingly stable. Think about it. When's the last time you heard of the Canadian stock market crashing? Just think about it. Our neighbors to the north, Canada, they're pretty stable most of the time. Okay? And so now, let us go ahead and look at a way to be able to trade and invest in the market of our friends to the north. Now, you must know specific moves and how to get into the Canadian market while still minimizing your risk and maximizing your profit potential. And you must know how to do it in a manner that is very intelligent. So what I'm about to give you are the key things to look for when observing market trends in the Canadian stock market, okay? And the easiest ways to choose from the over 1,500 companies that trade in the Canadian market. And then also, I'm going to give you the two categories of indices you should know about before you start trading in the Canadian market. Now, at the end of the day, as a trader and investor, you have a few different options for trading and investing in the Canadian stock market. Number one, purchase your positions, your stocks, through a licensed broker. Now, there are plenty of brokers who are licensed with the Canadian Stock Exchange, which is known as the TSX. The TSX. And you can place your orders directly with your particular broker, okay? And get that particular trade executed upon the TSX. Now, be sure to check about your fees associated with foreign investments, though, because they can sneak up on you. So you want to check on those. Now, the second thing that you can do as a clever way to get into the Canadian stock markets, okay, is you can purchase Canadian stocks and bonds via ETFs. That's right, exchange traded funds, which, as you know, are securities that track an index or a variety of assets like an index fund. Now, they're kind of like mutual funds, but they're traded like stocks and listed on stock exchanges, talking about those ETFs. Next, number three, talking about getting into that Canadian stock market. You can seek out something known as American Depository Receipts. They go under the acronym ADRs. Now, an American Depository Receipt is a way of purchasing stocks from other exchanges through the U.S. market. Once again, ADRs, they are a way of purchasing stocks from other exchanges through the U.S. markets. Okay? Now, ADRs are securities that allow foreign companies to trade on the U.S. financial exchanges or the U.S. stock markets. Now, next thing we need to go over is what time of day is the Canadian stock market open? Well, let me review those ways that I just gave you. Make sure you got them in your notes pertaining to how to break into the Canadian market, stock market. Okay, now I just went over ADRs, account depository receipts. Okay, ADRs. ETFs, exchange traded funds. Then also, You can purchase stocks directly through your stockbroker, and they will place the trade across the TSX, which is the Canadian Stock Exchange. Okay? So we've got that down. All right? Okay. Now, what time of day does the Canadian stock market open? Okay. Now, at least part of this is easy to remember. The TSX, okay, and something called the TSX Venture Exchange operate the same hours as our U.S. major markets do, which is from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. All right? 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Now, the Canadian market has an extension just like we do, just like we have our after-hours trading here in the U.S. markets. Now, that aftermarket activity in the Canadian market is not quite as robust as our pre- and post-market trading hours here in the United States. But it runs from, write this down, 4:15 to 5 p.m. on trading days. So the after-hours activity is from 4:15 to 5 p.m. on trading days. Talking about the Canadian market. Now, the Canadian market, quite naturally, just like our market here in the United States, is closed on Saturday and Sunday and on major holidays. Now, it's worth noting that the Canadian market holidays are not always the same as the U.S. market holidays. Okay? So please keep that in mind. Just because it may be a holiday here in the United States, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Canadian market is going to be closed. All right? Okay. Now, as we continue to analyze the Canadian stock market. In general, Canada is considered to have a pretty safe and secure, stable economy. The country has strong industries, and its monetary policy is stable, and it has a fairly low deficit. Okay, and those are all great things. Seem like we could learn some things from our neighbors to the north. However, like any market, it is subject to trends and other factors. For instance, the Canadian market relies heavily on commodities, very, very heavily on commodities. Now, there can be definite seasonal aspects to commodities like oil and gas, which can set the tone of the market. Now, there's a pretty high level of volatility involved with commodities. And since the Canadian financial markets have tons of these types of stocks, the market can at times be similarly volatile. Now, policy also can have a big effect. For instance, one of the largest market shaping trends in recent months has been the much talked about, you know it, legalization of marijuana in Canada. Now, while the law won't take effect until October of this year, it's already causing big waves in the market. Now, that brings me to this. What companies, pray tell, should you consider putting in your portfolio that are Canadian stock companies that are traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange? Now, like the U.S. exchanges, there are plenty of choices for stocks to trade in Canada. However, the market is set up a little bit different than it is here in the United States. So I'm going to present to you now some things to consider when choosing Canadian stocks. Now, there are over 1,500 companies that are listed on the TSX and about 2,000 more on the TSX Venture Exchange. Now, the TSX is the major and main stock exchange in Canada and includes larger companies like the Canadian National Railway, Suncor Energy, which is the largest energy company in Canada, by the way, and the Royal Bank of Canada, which is not only the largest bank in Canada, but the 12th largest bank in the world. Now, the TSX Venture Exchange has a lot of smaller companies. This is where you'll find the up-and-coming Canadian companies and also the ones that probably won't make it as well. This means that this exchange, okay, is the equivalent to our penny stocks here in the United States. Okay? Now, one of the things that you needed to know, okay, is that if you want to keep track of the movers and shakers in the Canadian stock market, you want to look at what is called the S&P TSX Composite Index. Write that down, because I don't want you to consider taking any Canadian positions until you complete all of your due diligence. Now, one of the best sources to keep up with the movers and shakers in the Canadian stock market is the S&P TSX Composite Index. Now, this particular index keeps track of the value of some of the biggest stocks in Canada, which can account for 70% or more of the exchange total volume. Talking about the TSX exchange total volume. Now, the index is made up of 11 different categories, and I'm about to list them, so get ready to write them down. The TSX which is the largest Canadian index, okay, or market, is made up of 11 different categories. They are financial, energy, materials, industrial, consumer discretionary, telecommunication services, healthcare, consumer staples, utilities, information technology, and real estate. I'm going to repeat them again. Here we go. Financial, talking about the 11 different categories in the TSX. Energy, materials, industrial, consumer discretionary, telecommunication services, healthcare, consumer staples, utilities, information technology, and real estate. Now, the first two categories, financial and energy, are the biggest ones by far, with materials and industrial coming in thereafter. So, the first two categories, financial and energy, are the largest, are the biggest categories by far in the Canadian market, with materials and industrials coming in thereafter. That means that these industries really shape, if you will, how the market is performing. And the associative economy or commodity price changes can have a pretty big impact. Keep that in mind. Okay? Now, what I've just given you is the basics, if you will, that you must have, that you must know before you take any Canadian positions, because you got to do your drill down first. So once you understand and overstand the basic information that I just submitted to you, then you can go ahead and peruse the Canadian markets to determine what positions are best for you. But the key thing is that you must do your drill down. Perform all of your due diligence. Invest and trade intelligently in the Canadian stock market. And get P.A.I.D.